We are often told that land is scarce back home because the population is growing. But when we look at the data, a different story emerges. The land is not gone. It is simply held in a way that separates the people from the soil. I want to share some eye-opening statistics with you today. Data that explains not just who owns the land, but how this ownership structure has fundamentally changed the human life cycle in Africa. According to the recent analysis by the United Nations Economic Commissions for Africa and the Land Matrix Initiative, the way land is owned in our continent is heavily fractured. While the laws change from country to country, for example, the difference between Nigeria's Land Use Act and South Africa's freehold system, the overall picture is quite similar across the continent. Here's a breakdown of who actually controls the land. Number one, let's look at the state governments. The state governments are said to control at least 90% of the land. In many African nations, including Ethiopia, Mozambique, Nigeria, Tanzania, the government holds what is known as the radical title. This means that the state effectively holds the land in trust, meaning that most citizens don't arguably own their land. They hold right of occupancy or leaseholds. This technically allows the state to seize or reallocate land more easily than if it were to be, private property. The second last segment of land ownership I want us to look at is the indigenous and customary communities. These only hold 10% of the title. I think this is perhaps the most heartbreaking statistics. Indigenous communities physically occupy and use vast amounts of rural land, estimated between 60 to 80% currently. However, they possess formally legal titles to only 10%. Only 10% of these communities legally possess titles. You guys, we have talked about the issue of title deeds, and how land moved from being a right to it being a financial asset. If you missed that video, I'll link it here. You can check it out. But I think this is really sad because the risk here is that without formal paperwork currently in the world that we live in, means that this land is legally vulnerable. It is often viewed as idle by governments and investors, making it easy to sell off to the highest bidder. And frankly, that's what has been currently happening. In fact, let's look at the next segment, which is the foreign entities. That's the third segment of landowners. And you'll see why I'm saying that this is a huge risk that the indigenous people don't really possess titles in the current state of affairs. Now, looking at the segment of the foreign entities, since the year 2000, we have seen a phenomenon called land grabbing. Foreign governments and corporations from China, the Gulf states, Europe, and even US have acquired over 10 million hectares of African land. I'll let that statistic sit with you just a little bit. Governments and corporations from China, the Gulf states, Europe, and the US have acquired over 10 million hectares of African land. Just think about that for a minute. This land is often arable farming land used to grow crops for export rather than feed the local population, which is crazy to me. The fourth segment of landowners I want us to look at is the religious institutions. These I will call the silent giants. We often overlook this, but religious bodies are among the largest non-state landowners. In countries like Uganda, Kenya, the Catholic Church and Islamic Trust on thousands of acres of prime real estate. These holdings are often tax exempt, allowing these institutions to accumulate wealth in property without the carrying cost that average citizens face. This is mind-blowing. So your church and your mosque is more wealthy in terms of land ownership than you, the local person. We need to talk about this a little bit more. Let's move on to the next segment of landowners, which is the private individuals. So private individuals, these are, I'm going to say, it could be individuals within Africa. It could be individuals who are not African as well. They are said to own slightly greater than 5% of the land in Africa. So when I say private individuals, think of true freehold private ownership where you own the land indefinitely without government interference. And this is a privilege enjoyed by a very tiny elite minority, which is said to be greater than 5%. Frankly, this is not the true picture for the average African because the average African is a tenant, a leaseholder, or an informal occupant. That's the current state of land ownership. If you look at all these statistics, I would say their impact on our lives is personal and profound. When we compare the life of an indigenous ancestor in the 1880s or before even the 1880s to a modern citizen in 2006 today, we can see that the modern system has introduced a massive tax on our time and energy. If you look at a life cycle comparison of how our lives looked like, especially from like age of land ownership, the cost of land ownership, time to build, and old age status, looking at those four fundamental metrics and comparing how our indigenous ancestors used to live versus the modern citizen in 2026. It's crazy because there's been a 25-year delay. Let me explain what I'm saying. Our ancestors viewed shelter as a social right. When a young man came of age, the community came together. In a matter of weeks, he had a home. He could spend his 20s, 30s, and 40s building his family, his craft, and his community's wealth. Today, we view shelter as a market commodity. A modern young person spends their prime productive years in their 20s, 30s, and 40s just trying to pay for walls around them. The modern land ownership system has effectively introduced what we call a 25-year delay in our life's progress, meaning that we're spending our best years paying for what our ancestors had by birthright. Understanding this history isn't just about going back, it's about realizing that the struggle for housing today isn't just about hard work. It's a structural issue that we need to understand to be able to solve. So every time I talk about building indigenously, it's not just enough to think about building indigenously and think about affordability. You cannot build without land. So land ownership is also a big topic that we need to tie together to the issue of building indigenously, because if you build a home but you do not have food, it's really pointless, isn't it? If you build a nice home but you do not have water to drink, it becomes pointless, or you do not have any way to get medical help, then it becomes really pointless. So it is also very important to think about land ownership. The elders felt secure and supported, while our seniors now, they feel very vulnerable. They spent a lot of money just building concrete walls all their lives. Now, when they get to old age, when they want to retire, they realize all their money is also now tied to these social welfare funds that they have to wait for every month. They're not free to like just enjoy life. And while they want to enjoy life with their children and grandchildren, people are busy spending their prime years paying for other walls, other cement blocks, which is crazy to me. So they're not able to technically be there for the vulnerable seniors, because even us, we're in the midst of the struggle, the same struggle that our parents went through. And we're going to pass this struggle to our kids and generations to come. And I think this is absolutely unsustainable. And it's going to, as you can see, it's taking our prime years and just wasting them away, unfortunately. So this is a wake-up call to all of us. When we talk about building indigenously, I think we cannot divorce the issue of land ownership as well. We have to look at it critically.